So I guess you are able to see my screen, and yeah. So this is the syllabus. Hope you have received the syllabus. Do you have the syllabus?
No, sir, not yet. We will have to download.
Okay, fine. So you take the syllabus, for this semester. I guess it is available in the institute and departmental website. If you don't get it, then let me know. I'll share with you people. So this is the syllabus of Environmental Engineering 1, and the code is CE1505 for this semester, and we have 3 lectures. And so we have total 4 units, and among these 4 units, if you say the first unit basically talks about the basic part, how this what are the problems, global environmental problems which we needs to deal in this particular course, and then how that is related to the water supply engineering problems, what kind of water supply systems we can design for rural civilization as well as for urban civilization. Now the big aspect is, before you go for any design of water supply system, you should be knowing about the demand. So we have specific strategy to see the demand, and when we talk about demand, we'll need to understand the population forecasting for the future decades, and based on that only we'll be able to calculate the demand, and hence we'll be able to design the supply schemes. Another one bigger aspect is the water which we are obtaining, which you are getting, how good it is or how healthier it is to consume, and in what form we can utilize it, whether we can take the water directly from the resources and then we can consume it, or we will have to go through some treatment plants, we'll have to go through some filtration. So those things becomes very much important, and those things are the issues which we need to deal with in this particular course, and those things will be discussed in the unit 1 itself, in under the head of quality of water. So we'll try to study the physical, chemical, and bacteriological characteristics of water, and then based on that we'll try to classify water, and we'll try to understand that for which type of water we need what type of treatment procedures, and finally what are the standards for drinking water. If we have some Indian standards, so we'll go through that. At the same time, World Health Organization has some standards to be followed, yeah, as far as drinking water, quality of drinking water is concerned. So those things will be discussed in unit 1, and followed by that we'll have unit 2, and then in unit 2 that is basically dedicated to sources of water. So we have several sources of water, and then depending upon the source, the quality of water also varies. So so we are going to talk about all of them. So when we talk about the source, from source to the consumer's point, so we have a very complicated scheme in between. So those things we'll be discussing. We have pipes, we have pumps, we have several other paraphernalia which needs to be installed and discussed to get that water. And then finally you have the distribution systems. In between you have the treatment also. So we have several type of valves, and the different type of water demands, means for fire accidents we need to have some dedicated system. Those things we'll be discussing, and all these are nothing but the aspect of distribution system of water. So storage, source of water, its transportation, storage, distributions, those things we'll be discussing in unit 2. Now in unit 3, you see, basically these are the 2 chapters which are there within the water supply engineering, and once you come to unit 3 you will see one thing, that we don't have any treatment plans in the scope of this particular syllabus. Why? The reason is those things we'll be discussing in the next semester. So entire treatment of the fresh water and as well as the wastewater will be discussed in the next semester. So So we actually will start from the scratches, and then we'll know about the different procedure for water to transport, and all the management of the water at the same time, the quality characteristics of water, and so on. Now coming to unit 3, we'll be talking about how to collect the wastewater or the sewage. Now there are several terms associated with the sewage. Those things we'll be discussing in detail in the unit 3. There's several type of components are there, different type of pipes are there. What do we call them? Those different type of pipes which basically carry the sewage from our home to the final sewage treatment plant. What kind of joints are there, what kinds of junctions are there, how to maintain them, what kinds of construction, and while constructing, what are the issues needs to be taken care of, what are the appurtenances, so those things, and at the same time hydraulic design of the sewer. So these are the different things which needs to be studied. The big aspect of planning of waste water or sewage system scheme is the managing the water which is coming because of precipitation or the rainfall. So that's a big problem, and that also changes with in different places, because we have different kind of weather in our country. In some places we have few tens of centimeters of rainfall, whereas in some places we have hundreds of centimeters of rainfall. So these kind of variation actually create heavy changes or abrupt changes in the entire design itself. So those things we'll be discussing in unit 3. Now unit 4, here we'll be talking about mostly disposal, so different type of disposals of the wastewater. And then we have the different type of pollution which we need to study being civil engineers. So let's say air pollution, this is another one big aspect, and then several components of air pollution, type of pollutants, how they are going to affect the health, what are the relation with them with the meteorological aspects. So those things we'll be talking about that, and then finally with the solid waste management we'll end this particular semester. So probably by the end of the semester you will have a very good idea about how water is collected up to that point. At the same time, once water is consumed, so how this wastewater is transported, how this wastewater is disposed of, and at the same time when you have solid waste which you are generating every day at your home, how to take care of that part. So those things you will be able to understand, or you'll be able to grasp by the end of this particular course. So hope all of you have got a very good idea about what we are going to discuss in this particular course. So now, if you have any questions, you can ask me or regarding syllabus and all, because now otherwise I'll start discussing a bit more about the topic, and we'll start with unit 1. So before coming to that, let me give you some time to understand and to ask me any questions if you have. Do not hesitate and don't keep any inhibition in your mind. It's not good, and you should always ask me question whenever I give you a time, because that will clear your doubts, and at the same time it will make you much more easy and comfortable in this particular course. Any questions from anyone? But then another one thing, let me tell you, through this course you can score a huge amount of marks. Maybe it is online, maybe it is offline, whatever it is. But then if you take good notes, and not only in the semester of the institute, at the same time in the competitive exam you can score huge amount of marks because every year you will get a lot of questions from environmental engineering, and those are very direct questions. So if you study this, you can discuss with the aspirants, for those who are actually preparing for engineering service or state engineering service or for GATE exam. You can discuss with them, you will get a very good idea about it. If you have any doubts about what I am talking about, so you'll be able to understand that this course is huge significant in scoring good marks in the competitive exam, and that is why you should take good notes. You should be very much attentive in the class, and we'll be discussing not only theory, but we'll be talking about mathematical problems wherever it is required, and as well as the design. We have several design scope in this particular syllabus. Now, any questions from anyone? Anyway, I hope all of you are able to hear me. Is that correct? So all of you are able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
fine.
sir.
Okay. So anyway, so hope my screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Very good. So this is the part one of the unit one, which we'll be discussing in today's class. So scope of environmental engineering, if we say, so first we need to understand that what are the purpose of talking about environmental engineering. So I have discussed a few things already. So here we say that bring together and integrate three principal areas: water, air, and solid waste management. So those are the three aspects which are covered. Being a civil engineer, now see, this subject is so diverse. If you change your profession, the scope of the subject also gets altered, and we all understand that. If you are a mechanical engineer, the way you see the environmental engineering scope is way different than an electronics engineer, because the activity of a mechanical engineer, the way it influences the environmental engineering environment itself, or the health of environment, is very different than the activity of a civil engineer, which can influence in negative way. And that is why it is imperative to understand the scope and how that is related to your profession. Fine. So that is why we say that there are three principal areas: water, air, and solid waste management. Now, when we see, being a civil engineer, will be given a land which might not be eligible or not be good for living or for staying. So what we do is, those inhabitable lands will be converted by us into habitable, or habitable structures, and as well as civilization, we can say. Now, through this transformation, what we have to keep in our mind is these three components of environment. We should be getting pure water for our daily purposes, and for the entire design periods of those structures. So that is not only for 5-10 years, it will be maybe 10-30 years, 40 years, 50 years. You never know, even more than that. Then comes, we should be getting good air for our breathing and inhalation, and then finally we should have a dedicated strategy to manage the solid waste. Otherwise, if you go through some videos in the YouTube or documentary in the YouTube, you will see, like, there are some cities, small cities in Latin American countries, where They don't have dedicated solid waste management. And once you see the top view of those area, you'll be able to understand how messy those areas are. I mean, how swampy it looks like and how filthy it looks like. So that's why these are the three aspects which needs to be discussed and which needs to be kept in our mind while planning things. Understanding the interface between hydrosphere, lithosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. So basically, these interface, actually I was talking about, it's the same kind of, you need to understand like what is the common thing which we can take care, just to take care of those four spheres which I am talking about. Hydrosphere, it basically deals with hydrosphere, so that is basically water bodies present in our globe. And lithosphere, that deals with all those mineral soils and the upper portions. So you have atmosphere and then biosphere. So the biosphere is a most ignored part, and we, being a civil engineers, we should not do that. Because knowing or unknowingly we deal with a lot of biotic components during our activities. And that is why we should be able to understand the interface of all those spheres, and then we should be able to focus on that particular scope, and accordingly we should design. So things are getting a bit more philosophical in the scope of environmental engineering, because it is like that. You need to understand the greater pictures, and you need to have that proper perspective of the entire scope of environmental engineering. Next comes impact of human upon environment. So transforming from natural needs to acquired needs. So that is the impact of human being on the environment. And then you need to understand, like, when human being like maybe 300 years or 400 years, when the number was not very significant compared to the amount of natural resources we had that time. Now, with respect to time, what has happened is in last 2 centuries, the population growth has become exponential and uncontrollable, which we say in technical word, population explosion. And because of that, all those natural resources are in great challenge. If you talk about quality of air, if you talk about quality of water, if you talk about carbon footprint, so that has a direct relation with the climate change. So now, when in 2021 you are basically studying environmental engineering, so you need to understand the greater picture. Otherwise, there is it will not serve the purpose fully. So knowing the subject is one thing, and then how you are utilizing them is another one thing. Like, everything we will discuss, everything you will study, and then while you are in practice you forget about all of them and you know about all of them. Then the purpose of keeping these subjects in your curriculum would not serve its purpose. And that is why you should understand, because of this change in the number of human, how this natural needs has got transferred into acquired needs. And everywhere, because of there is a no balance, or I would say, in other words, there is an imbalance between the demand and source. And because of that, what has happened is all those problems which are getting created. And most of you know that now, we have been, being a civil engineers, we construct a lot of dams, water dams, huge water dams you will see in the entire planet. And what has happened is, because of that, we have created some concentrated mass on a particular concentrated mass in a particular area of the entire globe, and that is actually affecting the overall earth rotation, and it is actually creating, and from there the problem starts. At the same time, carbon footprint is increasing, so that has some adverse impact. So you have all those ozone holes. So that is the reason you have global warming and climate change. So that is why we need to understand this transformation from natural needs to acquired needs, which is very, very important. Impact of environment upon human in a health concern and other concerns. So this part is though these are the long-term effect on the health, and that is not only the health of human being but also the all living beings. We will see now a lot of I would say mutation happening in the gene. There are chromosomal disorders, and those are nothing but creating all sorts of tumors and cancers. And if you see throughout the world, the number of malignant tumors in the body and cancers are actually increasing in an alarming rate. So that is why we need to understand, and we have to ensure, like, because of our activity, because of our daily uh, practice, we have to ensure that we don't create any more problem to the environment. So if we can ensure that part, rest will be fine. Now, improvement of the environmental quality. So that is where the roles of engineers comes, and not only the civil engineers. As I mentioned, like all engineering professionals or engineering practitioners, they should be taking this as the most important aspect of a project. Creating that project, or executing that project without creating significant harm to the environment or to the health of environment is what is the most desirable in recent time. So that is why optimizing demand and supply in sustainable manner, and from there the concept of sustainable practices, sustainable development has come into the pictures. And what is sustainability? Most of you might be knowing what is sustainability, or what is the sustainable development. So that is basically utilization of the natural resources in such a way that it would not cause any um, issues or problems for the future generation to use the same natural resources. So when natural resources are limited, when we use them, it gets depleted. But we'll have to ensure that because of our utilization, we should not consume in that rate, so that the future generation would not get anything. So that is basically an unsustainable practice, and that is why the rate at which we deplete the natural resources would be very much adaptable for the environment itself, so that it can produce natural resources for the future generation, and then this balance is actually maintained. So that is the main objectives for the engineers, and that is why we say the most important role of the engineers are to improve the environmental quality. So, we should be discussing about the global environmental problems. From there only, we'll be able to understand some of these global environmental problems are being faced these days because of the ignorance of the past generation of engineers and practitioners. So we have come to a point where we don't have any time to think of, and we cannot go back again at the same time. So from this point onwards, we'll need to rethink before we do any activity how they're going to impact the environment. So that should be the major priority before we start any civil engineering project. So what are the global environmental problems which we have actually come across till date, if we talk about 2021. So the first one is deforestation. If you see, overall 40% of the world jungles and forests have been destroyed just to meet the demand of the people and their habitable place. And because of that, what has happened is that deforestation has a lot of impact on the environment and the ecological balance. So it has created a new interface between the forest life and the civilized life like human being and animals. So that is the prime cause of creating the imbalance. I guess most of you will be able to relate what you might have studied during your environment and ecology courses. Next comes industrialization. Now that industrialization is an indirect effect. When you have huge amount of consumers and you don't have that much amount of natural resources or product, so in order to overcome this extra demand, human beings started creating more and more and more industrializations, and because of that, so many industries, we tend to forget about the health of environment. Without thinking much, we just built up our industry and plants everywhere. And you see, in few of the places, industrialization actually has caused deforestation also. Now, if you see in South China Sea, I mean, not only in South China Sea, but mostly we'll see that has become a very hot topic of interest these days. How those small coral reefs are being, reclaimed and creating artificial island and being used as the defense cell for Chinese government. So you will see this kind of, and then seeing that now Vietnamese and then other surrounding countries are doing the same thing, and by doing that they are actually changing the overall the ecological balance of that particular area, and marine life is actually in the great threat because of that activities. And most of the activities, if you see, they are anthropogenic or created by human beings. So that is one part of industrialization. Dredging, reclamation, creating artificial land is good as long as it does not harm the environment or the marine aquatic life. So those parts are there, loss of ecological balance. So because of the deforestation and industrialization, we have the loss of ecological balance. And once you have ecological balance lost, now the concept of air and water pollutions come into the picture. Now you are basically polluting things because the rate by which nature can heal itself, we are creating disturbance more than that rate, and that is where, as a result, we have air and water pollution. Next comes increased consumption of natural resources. So that is actually a result of the population explosion. So now natural resources are also in threat, and they are being depleted in huge amount, and that is creating the unsustainable utilizations, we can say. Next comes production of waste. Now if you consume more, then you will produce waste also in more quantity than what you can handle naturally. And that is why now people are also, so many civil engineers are putting a lot of effort to create efficient waste management systems, and which we will be discussing in this particular course also. Now, extinction of wildlife, that's what actually I was talking about. This is happening because of the deforestation primarily, and then industrialization. Recently there was a movie which was released in Amazon Prime. If you go through that, or if you watch that movie, you'll have a very good idea about how this deforestation and unplanned industrialization has caused severe damage to the wildlife. Now they don't have proper place to go through it. They don't have proper place to live. They don't have proper place to take their prey, and eat every day, getting proper food, sufficient amount of food. Those things, it's a different ecological balance which we say, and that is what is not happening. Soil erosion, it will be there. Whenever you have deforestation, soil erosion will be there. And these days you might be observing a lot of tide related problems or flooding because of the high tide. and at the same time, that was not there previously. So what has happened is the number of people are increasing, so we need more amount of beaches, or we decorated beach, I would say, people to enjoy. And that is why what we are doing is we are basically distracting all the mangroves forest, and we are creating beaches. And those mangroves are actually, they act as retarders to the flood water or high tide water to come to the shore. But now that is not happening, so that is why a lot of you will see destruction which is happening, and because of that we have a lot of loss of wealth in terms of money and in terms of natural resources, which is also happening. So habitual destruction is also happening because of that. So these are the global environmental problem which needs to be dealt very carefully, so that in future generation or in future days we don't face escalated problem from the same issues. So that is the prime objective. So with this, I'll stop today.